So what we're doing is, for those of you who are just in today, we're going through the mitzvahs one at a time according to the 613 mitzvahs in the Torah. By the way, I never explained. Everybody agrees. You see, according to the Talmud, which is the source for everything, the Talmud says that by the we have 613 mitzvahs. Now, the mitzvahs obviously have subcategories. So no matter how you count them, and the commentaries have different opinions how to count the mitzvahs, everybody agrees you end up with a total of 613. So for example, you put on tefillin, you got the head tefillin and the hand tefillin. Now is that two mitzvahs or is that one mitzvah? So there are different opinions how to count it. But at the end of the day, it's like one of those kids' puzzles where you got to come up with a certain shape. And I don't care how you put the pieces in as long as you end up with that shape. You have to use all the pieces and end up with the shape. Usually it's a sailboat. You have to make a sailboat with those 15 pieces. I don't care how you do it, and there are more than one way to do it as long as you end up with this. So we start there, 613 mitzvahs. Now mitzvahs have subcategories. There's subcategories and subcategories of subcategories. So essentially there are thousands of commands and thousands of things that we have to do. But the number 613 is part of the oral tradition. That means that was given down there 613 mitzvahs, and now you figure out a way to count it. The count we know is there's a given. Moshe Rabbeinu was told at Har Sinai, Moses was told at Sinai, there are 613 mitzvahs. That's a oral tradition. Now, how he didn't necessarily tell us exactly how to count. That's why the Maimonides and Nachmanides will have, Rambam and Ramban will have different opinions how you achieve that total. Nobody disagrees that that is the total that you have to arrive at. So the next one is the prohibition of listening to one litigant in court without the other litigant being present. Now, before anything, in the Jewish legal system, the Jewish legal system is different than the American legal system or any other legal system. In the American legal system, you are judged by a jury of your peers. And they used to say that it's 12 people who weren't smart enough to get off of jury duty. Right, so they are the ones who are going to judge you, and they have no legal expertise. To the contrary, they're supposed to represent a cross-section of Americana. Is that confidence instilling? They are a cross-section of Americana. They will decide whether or not you're going to spend a long time in jail or not. And a good lawyer puts on a good show, is able to then have a good time with the jury. In Torah, it doesn't work. I actually heard about a court case in the United States where there was a trial for some guy killed a little girl. And the jury was going to go out and deliberate, and the prosecutor had, it looked pretty obvious the guy was guilty. Then the defense attorney, the judge asked the defense attorney if he'd like to present his final argument. So he gets up and he says, yes, there's only one flaw in the entire argument of the prosecutor, which is that in the next 2 minutes, the young little girl is going to walk in through the door of the courtroom. So everybody faces the door of the courtroom, wait 2 minutes pass, 3 minutes pass, 4 minutes pass, she doesn't show up. So the judge says, what's going on, Mr. Burns? And he says, well, the law is that the jury has to be convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that he committed the crime. Now, if the jury was convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that he committed a crime, they wouldn't be looking at the door to see if the little girl is going to walk in. It was a great argument, right? So the judge said to him, yeah, but I was watching you and you were looking at the door also. Right? Which doesn't make any sense. It has nothing to do with it. That's just like the truth of the matter is his argument is an excellent argument. If your law is that you have to be convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt, there's no reason for you to be looking at the door. Right? So his argument logically is right, but they found the guy guilty anyway. So logically he's right. In Torah, the Torah doesn't say that at all. The Torah says, first of all, you are not judged by a jury of your peers, you are judged by legal experts only. And there are no lawyers. The judges cross-examine witnesses. Witnesses have to have witnessed the crime. Judges do the cross-examining, and then the judges deliberate, and we sentence based on a majority. We'll see about what that means in a second. Now, whatever the litigation is, let's say there's a monetary litigation. I claim that you sideswiped me, you owe me $500, you claim you didn't. I'm not allowed to present my argument to the judges unless you're present. And the judges are not allowed to listen to my argument unless both litigants are present. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? The halacha requires that both litigants have to be present. Why?
Might be trying to scam some deal between them.
Between who and who?
Them too. I'll go tell one story, and you come later and tell another story.
Okay, that could be. There's it could be, but generally we're in cahoots. Where you're going to hear me out anyway, because you can't judge without only hearing one side of the story. So they're going to hear it. It's just that you can't hear it if I'm not present. You're not allowed to listen to it if I'm not present. A very logical reason for it.
It's for forgive me for the big words, but it's perception is subjective. So if me and you are sitting in a car and you mishear me, and I say, you said cat when you meant dat, and you say, no, I said cat, you misheard me. You need a third person to clarify because either person's perception could be wrong. So to have two people watch a third person, two is better than one because one you can't prove.
Okay, that could be also. That could be also. There's an even more basic reason. Yeah, go ahead.
You just have to know what part of your case you need to present. So if someone's saying, whatever, if someone changed their story from you stole $50 to you stole $20, and if I say I didn't steal $50, that sounds like nonsense.
Okay, getting closer. You're getting closer, yeah.
I think you need to see the other person's reaction. So
Why?
Because to be judged is not only is to involve all your senses, so not just to read.
Okay, you're all getting closer. Yeah, you see the idea. There's the expression first impressions. If I'm a judge, and you know this from personal life, I'll show you some examples. If you come to court the first day, again, your first name is? Sam. Sam comes to court and says, you owe him $50. Now, if you're not there to deny it on the spot, the first thing in life, the first impression takes root. You are automatically put into a more offensive position in my mind. Because if somebody, the first time you hear the story, when you hear the story, it takes a tremendous amount to get it out of your mind. There are a lot of examples, like you read a news item, and then after you read the news item, then somebody denies it. Yeah, but I read it in the newspaper, they wouldn't have reported it if there wasn't at least something to it, and so on and so forth. If you come to court and you claim that this guy owes you $50, and as soon as you say, it says, I do not, it's not, I don't know you $50, so I never had a chance to take root. But if you come to court and you present your case without the other person there, first, that we are so subject to first impressions in life in general. We're very subject to first impressions. And therefore the Torah says you're a judge, you're a legal expert in everything about it, but you're also a human being. And as a human being, you're going to start with a given. The given is that if you said it, it must be true, otherwise you wouldn't have said it. Now he's coming along saying it's not true. Well, why did you come first? You understand? Therefore the Torah says, you know what, you have to have, both of you have to be present, and I'm not allowed to listen to either one of you without the other one of you being there. Didn't ever happen to you, somebody told you a nice good piece of gossip about somebody, and then the guy comes over and says, hey Joe, I heard that I heard you got arrested yesterday. I said, well, it's not true. I don't know who told you, but it's absolutely not true. In your own mind, what are you thinking? Well, probably what you call arrest, what I call arrest, are not the same thing. You're assuming where there was smoke, there was fire, and life experience shows that there could be smoke and no fire at all, because there are plenty of times in life where people make up stories and people make up the entire situation. That carries over the idea. First, I heard about a guy was going out on a date with a girl, in what's called a shidduch. You know how the couple meets. And they decide after a while if they want to get married. So the guy was very, very self-conscious because he was short. And he just felt that, he's short and he's self-conscious, and the girl's not going to like him. So he went to one of his rabbis, and his rabbi said he was worried that, the girl wants to, she's a little taller than him. So the rabbi said to him, well, when you go out on your first date, put some lifts in your shoes. So he said, yeah, but Rebbe, and at a certain point the lifts are going to come out. Then she's going to see, he says, it doesn't matter. After the first impression, she'll always see you as being tall. And after that, she'll think, well, he's just a short guy who happens to be, he's a tall guy who's just having a short day today. That sort of thing. As opposed to, because the first impression, and it's so true, because when you guys go for job interviews, I don't know if you're in college, you're out of college, you're going to go for a job interview, right? When you go for a job interview, you can take a haircut, you're going to shave, you're going to put on a suit, you're going to look smart, you go in there, take off all earrings, hair is one color, and you go in for the job. Now, you think that the guy behind the desk doesn't know that you've been basically a hedonist for the last 4 years in college. It's the first time you've worn a button-down shirt since you're 17, and you're on your best behavior. You haven't had a haircut in years, and here you are sitting trying to impress him, and you're out of college. You think he was in college too, but you're creating an impression. And not only you're creating an impression, you're creating the impression that impressions are important. People say, don't judge me based on what I look like. Judge me based on what I am inside. That's all the young idealism. We've all been through that, yeah? But what you am inside is somebody who's foolish enough to say that on the outside. That's what you am inside. And what you am inside is somebody who doesn't know how the world works. I judge you, and now I realize how the world works. We had a guy in Chicago. There was a store in Chicago where he bought like a grocery store. And he had non-kosher products, but that's where he shipped in the Chalav Yisrael milk from New York. He had the kosher milk, the high-grade kosher milk. So you remember the milk pail on Devon. I don't know if it's still there. So the guy had this shop. He had the kosher section and a non-kosher section. We have to go in there. He had these public school kids working for him. And they worked behind the counter. You'd ask for an item, and they pull it down on the shelf. Very efficient store. These kids had a rule. He had a rule. They have to wear a white shirt and a tie. Now, I would look over the counter. They're wearing jeans, and they're wearing what do you call it? They're wearing jeans and gym shoes. But over the top of the counter, what you see is you see a white shirt, and you see a tie, and you see and they're wearing an apron. Now that affects you as this is a kid's a professional of some sort. That's the whole idea of uniforms in general. When you see a uniform where you walk into an office, somebody's wearing a lab coat. You walk into an optometry shop to order glasses, and the lady behind the counter is wearing a lab coat. Oh, she must know what she's doing because she's wearing a lab coat. There's a certain confidence that it instills in us because that's the first impression. And first impressions make a tremendous, tremendous impact on us. Therefore, the Torah says, you know what? You're a judge. You cannot be subject to those first impressions. Now, somebody's got to speak first, obviously. Somebody's going to put their claim first in Beis Din, in court. But the fact that somebody else is there to immediately tell you that's not what happened and shout you down or argue you down, so never takes root. It never takes root. When my kids come in, Daddy, he hit me. All right, so once you know your kids, you realize it doesn't make any first impression. I know the kid. I know exactly what happened. Daddy, she spit at me. Okay, what did you do to her? Obviously she didn't just walk up to you out of the clear blue, considering you're bigger and stronger, and just go and spit on you. Obviously something happened over it. So that's only when you know your kids well enough. When I would go complaining to my father that my brother hit me, my father's reaction was, don't bother people, you won't get hit. Right, which killed me. That devastated me. Like maybe it was him. How do you know? Maybe it was him. It was never him. It was always me. Maybe it was him. That bothered me very much. Why did you know? The answer is you know your customers. But when you're in court, I don't know any customers. I don't know who's telling me the truth over here, and therefore you cannot be there. You cannot accept it. This carries over to all areas in life. This carries over to the spiritual realm as well. I don't like to use the spiritual realm, into the religious realm as well, because you take a kid, people, in a religious society, we try to instill certain values in children in certain education from the earliest age. And so the first thing a kid born in a Torah home is Torah tziva lanu Moshe. Moshe commanded us the Torah. And we teach kids how to daven, and we teach kids how to do mitzvahs. I mean, when they're older, they're going to make their own choices anyway. That's true. But the first impression is that this is what we do. I remember my nephew was about 7 years old when he heard about the theory of evolution. And he came home laughing hysterically. He said to his father, Daddy, there are people who think that we come from monkeys. And he found that very funny because he had never heard that before, because the first impression was God created the world and man comes from man. Man does not come from gorilla or chimpanzee. And so to him that struck with it because the entire thing creates a first impression. If you raise your children with kindness in the home, that creates an impression. Then the children are going to raise a home where they're going to be kind to each other, hopefully, and to others as well. The first impression is a very powerful motivator. It's a very powerful instrument in life. We don't realize ourselves how much that's affecting us. And therefore, the Torah is telling you over here that this is something that the mitzvah is describing judges in court. But you see that this mitzvah applies to every one of us. We have to be careful not to be subject to first impressions. And if there were first impressions that made the wrong impression, we have to re-examine it. But realize that it's so powerful, therefore we do want to impress on our kids certain values from the earliest age, because it's very difficult to get past that. That's a very vital tool when you're raising children. I think everybody knows that you want to make a good first impression. When a couple meets on a date, you put on you try to make a good first impression, which is generally when you make a bad impression because you're trying too hard. But you try to make a good first impression. We all know it's a show. We all know so you're on your best behavior, she's on her best behavior. Okay? We all know that, but that's what's expected in that situation. Same thing when you're applying for a job or any other social interaction. The next one is that you are not allowed, the next mitzvah, is the prohibition of accepting the testimony of a sinner or to do anything on account of what he has said. That means that in a court, The court is limited to who, in Torah halacha, there's a limit on who qualifies to be a witness. So again, let's back up. Before anything, law in Torah is determined based on witnesses. That is the evidence in court. Evidence is witnesses. Witnesses are cross-examined by the judges. They have to go through certain standard questions which they have to answer correctly, other standard questions which they could say we don't know, but they cannot contradict each other. And then the judges analyze the data and they turn in a ruling. Now, yeah, go ahead.
Two witnesses, right?
Two witnesses.
You can have more.
Two witnesses in ritual law, two witnesses in criminal law, one witness in monetary law.
But you can have more?
You don't need more. You could have more, but the more you have, that makes it a little trickier because if let's say you have a group of 4 witnesses, then if any of them contradict each other, the whole group is considered what do you call it? They're invalidated. So if you have 2 witnesses, there's less chance. And the reason they're cross-examined, obviously, is because somebody mentioned earlier that maybe the witnesses have a scam going over here that they're trying. I think you said that the witnesses have planned something out, and therefore we cross-examine the witnesses. But you have to realize now you're going to have a witness come to court who's a legitimate witness. So the halacha says anybody who is what's considered a sinner from Allah. Now, sinner over here doesn't mean that once in a while he had a bad day, ate non-kosher food. You know, his guy was hungry and he drove past the McDonald's, and he couldn't control himself and he went in and he had a McDonald's shake. Okay, you're no longer a legitimate witness. That's how the halacha says. Everybody has, you have to win. You have the battles. Sometimes, hopefully, most of the time we win the battles. Once in a while, here we're talking about somebody who has specifically got an Achilles heel in the area of money. So the examples they give over here is somebody who is a gambler, somebody who gambles for a living, somebody who's already an established robber, or somebody who is willing to compromise himself for the sake of money. Somebody who gambles. We're not talking about recreational gambling here. We're talking about somebody who goes to the track once in a while, bets on the horses. We're talking about somebody who makes his main living through gambling. Somebody who makes his running. You're running numbers on the West Coast, and you're a bookie, and you're whatever it is that you're doing over there. The chances are that you will compromise yourself for money. By the way, a guy in England just won. There are 2 bets that were won. Somebody said a guy got 500 to 1 odds that he bet that Suarez would bite somebody in the World Cup, and he won. I think he won about 2,000 pounds, something like that. On a 500 to 1 bet. He bet that Suarez would win. And there's another guy in England who won 100,000 pounds because when his son was born, he made a bet that he would be signed by one of the soccer teams and he'd be the youngest player on the squad. And sure enough, his son grew up, became a soccer player, was signed by the team, was the youngest player on the squad. So I would assume that he paid them off 50,000 pounds to sign his son, then they could cut him, as long as he wins the bet. I don't know exactly what the details were. But the other guy, that's a good bet. I bet you that he will bite somebody and during the World Cup, at least, and he won, there he goes home with the money. So somebody who is a professional gambler becomes invalid to testify. Minors cannot testify. Basically, somebody who is mentally unstable cannot testify in Beis Din. Now, Beis Din is court, by the way. How to determine if somebody is mentally unstable? There are certain signs of mental instability. If somebody sleeps in a cemetery alone overnight, he is considered mentally unstable. Most people would not sleep in a cemetery alone overnight. People get the heebie-jeebies from cemeteries. I once said this in the class, and one of the guys in class said, "Oh, I would. I don't know, bro." Everybody started moving away from this guy. People just started backing away from him. So there are signs of mental instability. Now, it's also, according to halacha, what constitutes mental instability is not always so simple. Remember, there's a guy named John Wayne Gacy, Mr. Lefkowitz. You've heard of John Wayne Gacy, haven't you? Have you heard of John Wayne Gacy? No kidding. He was a Chicago man. So John Wayne Gacy remember John Wayne Gacy? Yeah, John Wayne Gacy killed 33 teenagers First he abused them and he killed them and he buried them all over his property. You know, of course, you know, when they discovered this, that there were bodies buried on, he lived in one of the, in Arlington Heights or something, one of these places, yeah, you know, or you know, the Plains, something like that. And of course, they speak to the next door neighbor. Says, "Oh, he was such a nice man. You know, he always helped me bring out my groceries from the car. You know, it just like he looked like Archie Bunker. You know, that sort of thing." Then they found he had murdered and buried 33 kids. So the first he was in jail. First he was examined by a team of psychologists, expert psychologists, who after 6 months they turned in their verdict that he is not stable. Which is, you know, I'm glad they learned something in school. You know, it took a team of psychologists 6 months to decide he's not stable because, you know, after all, killing 33 kids is so common that, you know, we're not sure. You know, so that was it. Then they put him in prison. Eventually, they killed him with lethal injection. After 10 years of taking up taxpayers' money, they killed him with lethal injection. Now, would you say that the guy is normal? Would the guy, you know, so in halacha, anytime somebody sins, they have become temporarily insane, because a sane person wouldn't sin if you realize what a sin is and you really realize the severity of it. We would never sin. At the moment that we sin, we have taken leave of our senses. But that doesn't constitute classical insanity. What we're talking about here is somebody who has mental instability, means somebody who will do something that is completely and utterly unacceptable. Oh, I heard about a guy in, they told me, I think this took place in Iran. A guy in my class once told me there were these guys who were playing cards, and the wager was that whoever loses has to go into a cemetery at night and knock 3 nails into a tombstone. So they play cards, one of the guys loses. What's that? You know how these stories go. And so the guy, you got to knock 3 nails into his tombstone. Okay, so one of the guys, apparently it's a true story. It's certainly true that I heard it. One of the guys, the guy loses and he goes into the cemetery. It's alone at night, probably a little drizzle too. You know, it's real dark. And the guy goes into the cemetery. His hands are shaking, and he goes over to the nearest tombstone. He takes the first nail, and boom, 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 he knocks it into the thing. He takes the second nail, and boom, 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 he knocks it. And his hands are shaking. He's shaking so much. He's so terrified. He knocks at the third nail, and he turns to run, and somebody grabs him from behind. And apparently the guy he was so terrified he had a heart attack and he died on the spot. Then the police came in and they inspected and they found that nobody grabbed him. In his panic, he had nailed his own coat to the tombstone. So when he turned to run, it was his own coat that caught him. So I've always used that, you know, as a lesson in life, that sometimes a person wants to make some progress in a certain direction and we blame everybody around us, when in fact we're holding ourselves back. We're nailing our own coats to the tombstone. Sometimes it's we who are, I didn't know if my parents would have done this, and my rabbi's this, and the teachers would have done this, if I would have gotten a break here, and at the end of the day, we're holding ourselves back. We're nailed into the tombstone. So the cemetery represents somebody who is, what do you call it? Somebody who is mentally unstable. And in addition, women are not valid to be witnesses according to halacha. Relatives or anybody else who is biased is also invalid to be a witness according to halacha. Women, the most basic explanation for why women are invalid, because theoretically women could be pressured more easily. Women are more vulnerable to some sort of pressure, and somebody could threaten them, and they get nervous, and therefore the women are invalid. There's nothing disparaging about women. To the contrary, according to halacha, we say that women have a intuition that men don't have. Women are at a higher level of natural spiritual inclination than men are. Women have a greater insight into people, the Talmud says. So we're no question that there are differences between men and women. And we've pointed out many times that anything that we say about women, we could say the same about men in the opposite direction. So, you know, if we say that women are more emotional, men are more logical, and you ask somebody which is better, to be emotional or logical, the answer is, depends on the situation. It really depends on the situation, because if your 3-year-old falls and scrapes his knee, and mommy goes over to kiss the boo-boo and make it better, the mommy kisses the boo-boo, daddy says, "Come on, man up. We all know that doesn't work. You know, let's be logical about this. You know, that's not the thing that's needed." So, you know, you need emotion. Human beings are not logical. We are psychological. We are made up of a combination of both. There's no better or worse. These are facts, and therefore we have to deal with the facts as they are. Yes, please.
I also heard, I don't know if it was a very good source, but a friend of mine told me about this halakha that women can't be witnesses because when they're speaking to a judge, and if there's a woman and a man, women are just always more convincing, and people would more likely lean to what a woman says versus.
I never heard that. I don't know of any source. It doesn't mean it's not true. And I don't know that women are necessarily more convincing. Women are more fun to look at. They're not necessarily more. They're not for men anyway. They're not more convincing, and certainly not for women judges. But there are no women judges in halacha either. So that's not an issue. It has more to do with also the physiological makeup of women and the women. I've never heard that. I don't know that women are more convincing. Women just won't let you go until you agree with them. You know, I don't know if that's what you call more convincing. You know, they just say, you know, they'll just chap you away till you have to do what you do what they say. I don't know. The most basic idea among the commentaries is that women are women are more vulnerable to some sort of some sort of pressure. Okay, the next mitzvah is a very strange one. In this area of the legal process. A Beis Din in Torah law, there is a concept of capital punishment. So what happens is you have a court. Now there are three types of courts that you have in Torah. There is a court of 3 judges, which can judge monetary law. They cannot judge capital or corporal offenses. They can only judge monetary law. You have a court of 23, which can judge capital cases, and then you have the Sanhedrin of 71, which is the final court of appeals, and they judge certain things like a false prophet or somebody who is rebelling against the entire system, what's called a zaken mamre, somebody who rules against the legal system in halacha, and that's a court of 71. A court of 23 rules based on a majority. Now, if there's a 12-11 split to acquit him, he is acquitted. If, let's say it's a case of capital offense, let's say there's a murder trial or a idol worshiper, and we have to decide it could be this man is going to be put to death, where he's on trial now for idol worship. If there's a 12-11 split to condemn him, that find him guilty, they do not rule on him. They do not execute him based on that majority. The judges have to then go and deliberate until somebody is convinced to change their mind. If it becomes 12-11 in his favor, he's automatically acquitted. If it becomes 13 to 10 against him, then we do not execute based on a majority of 1. That's a special law built in. You don't execute based on a majority of 1. Either you have a majority of 1 to acquit, to go in the easy direction, or you deliberate until somebody changes their mind. If nobody changes their mind, then we start adding judges. Then you start adding 2 judges up until 71. If you get 2 judges and they split, you still haven't got a majority. So you add another 2 judges. Then they split till you get to a point where either you have a majority of 2 to find him guilty or a majority of 1 that is in the favor of acquitting, unless you get to a judge of a grand total of 71. Then they have to debate it with each other until they finally get to the point where they get to the point where they can make a decision. That is what the halacha says, because in the halacha there's a certain what that teaches us is that there's a certain degree of mercy within the system. There's got to be a certain degree of mercy. We're not willing to execute somebody based on a majority of 1. In any event, that is the Torah approach to the legal system, and we no longer have the ability nowadays. We no longer have the ability to sentence people. There's no capital punishment. There's no corporal punishment in Torah society nowadays.